They say money can buy anything, but standing in that rain, holding a dying woman and a child who believed in me, I learned the price of what I'd bought, and it was too high. 3 months earlier, the world looked different, simpler, the kind of simple that comes from never asking the hard questions. 10:15 p.m., Fairmont Olympic Hotel, Seattle. The applause still echoed in Marcus Reed's ears as he stepped through the marble lobby, past the glittering chandeliers and the men in $1,000 suits who clapped him on the shoulder like they knew him. They didn't. They knew his quarterly reports, his expansion into Asian markets, the Reed logistics empire that moved 40% of the Pacific Northwest freight. They knew the numbers. That was enough. The valet brought the Bentley around, black and gleaming under the hotel's golden lights. Lawrence held the door, his weathered face impassive as always, the kind of neutrality that came from 12 years of watching other people's lives unfold from the driver's seat. Marcus slid into the back, tugging at his bow tie until it hung loose around his collar. The Tom Ford tuxedo felt like a straitjacket now, expensive fabric that cost more than most people made in a month. The Patek Philippe on his wrist caught the interior light, $120,000 of Swiss engineering ticking away seconds he'd never get back. Lawrence's eyes found his in the rearview mirror. "Home, Mr. Reed?" Marcus glanced at his phone. 10:17 Owen's therapy session ran until 11. Dr. Patel didn't like interruptions, and Owen needed the full hour, needed the routine, needed the structure that Marcus couldn't always provide. "Not yet, drive around." The Bentley pulled into Seattle's night traffic, rain starting to speckle the windows. It always rained here. 43 inches a year, the locals said, like it was something to be proud of. Marcus watched the drops race each other down the Gettys, merging and splitting and disappearing into nothing. His phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. "Board approved Singapore expansion. Congratulations." Another buzz. "Eleanor Hastings wants meeting Vancouver acquisition." Another. "Your mother called. Third time today." Marcus silenced the phone and closed his eyes. The gala had raised $500,000 for children's hospitals. He'd given a speech about corporate responsibility, about giving back to the community, about how success meant nothing if it didn't lift others. 300 people had stood and applauded. The mayor had shaken his hand. A journalist from Seattle Times had asked for an interview about his philanthropic vision. He'd smiled through all of it, said the right words, posed for the photos. And now, alone in the back of a car that cost more than most people's houses, he felt nothing. Just the familiar hollow ache where something vital should have been. The rain picked up, drumming harder against the roof. Marcus opened his eyes, watching the city slide past. Pioneer Square, with its homeless camps tucked under awnings. The International District. Neon signs flickering in languages he couldn't read. 3rd Avenue, where the buses stopped running after midnight and the people who rode them had to find other ways home. A figure huddled in a doorway, rain-soaked cardboard boxes collapsing around them. Marcus looked away. Not his problem. He paid his taxes, donated to charities, wrote checks at galas. That was enough. It had to be enough. "Mr. Reed," Lawrence's voice carried a note of concern, "we should head to Dr. Patel's soon." Marcus checked the time. 10:43, 17 minutes. 5 more minutes, and the Bentley turned onto Pike Street, and that's when the rain became something biblical. Not drops anymore, but sheets, walls of water that turned the windshield into a blur. Lawrence slowed, hazards blinking, pulling toward the curb near a bus shelter. "Need to wait this out, sir. Can't see the road." Marcus nodded, already looking back at his phone. Emails piling up. Singapore wanted confirmation on warehouse locations. Vancouver deal needed signatures by Friday. His mother's voicemail icon glowed red with urgency. Through the rain-streaked window, barely visible, the bus shelter materialized like a ghost. And inside it, 2 figures, one slumped over, one small. Marcus's finger hovered over his mother's voicemail, but something made him look up. Really look. The smaller figure moved. A child, maybe 3 or 4, wearing what might have once been a beige dress. The fabric hung wrong, torn somewhere. She was trying to wake the other figure, shaking her shoulder with tiny hands. "Lawrence!" Marcus heard his own voice from a distance. "Stop here." "Sir?" "Stop the car." The Bentley pulled fully to the curb, 10 feet from the shelter. Marcus could see more clearly now. The woman was young, late 20s maybe, with blonde hair plastered dark against her skull. Her lips were gray, not pale, gray. The kind of gray that meant the body was giving up. The child looked up, directly at the Bentley's tinted windows. She couldn't see inside, couldn't know anyone was watching, but her face held something that made Marcus's chest constrict. Not fear, not desperation. Hope. The kind of hope that should have died already, but somehow hadn't. She turned back to her mother, tried again to wake her. Then she looked toward the street, toward the cars rushing past through the rain, and made a decision. She picked up a ratty stuffed bear from the bench, clutched it to her chest, and ran, straight toward the Bentley, straight into traffic. A horn blared. Headlights swerved. Marcus was out of the car before he knew he'd opened the door, rain hitting him like a physical blow. The child reached the Bentley's passenger side and slapped both palms against the window, her face pressed to the glass. Lawrence had the window down already, leaning over. "Little girl, get back on the sidewalk. It's dangerous." But she wasn't listening. She was crying now, tears mixing with rain, looking up at the window with those same hopeful eyes. "Don't cry, Mommy." Her voice was so small, nearly lost in the downpour. She wasn't talking to them. She was talking to the figure in the bus shelter, to the mother who couldn't hear her. "Maybe that man will help us." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, some calcified wall he'd been building for 4 years. He looked past the child to the shelter, to the woman whose chest barely rose and fell, and time did something strange. It stretched and compressed all at once, pulling him back to another hospital, another woman whose breathing had gone shallow and wrong, another moment when he'd been too late. 3 seconds. That's how long he stood there, rain soaking through $8,000 of Italian wool, while his mind calculated odds and logistics and consequences. Owen needed to be picked up. Dr. Patel wouldn't understand. His mother's third call meant emergency. Singapore deal needed attention. The child's fingers slipped on the wet glass and she nearly fell backward into the street. Marcus caught her. Didn't remember moving, but he had her, this tiny soaked thing that weighed nothing, all bird bones and trembling cold. The stuffed bear pressed between them, its single remaining eye staring up at him like an accusation. "Are you an angel?" She looked at him with something that hurt to meet. "Mommy said angels come when you stop praying." Marcus's throat closed. He couldn't speak, couldn't form words that would make sense of this moment. He wasn't an angel. He was a man who'd stopped praying the day his wife died giving birth to their son. A man who'd spent 4 years building walls instead of bridges, who'd fired 300 people last quarter to boost shareholder value, who'd just given a speech about compassion while stepping over the broken on his way to the podium. He looked at the woman in the shelter. 20 feet away, she hadn't moved, hadn't even twitched. "Lawrence, call 911. "Sir, Owen, now." Marcus moved toward the shelter, the child still in his arms. Up close, the woman looked worse. Mid to late 20s, with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting a war no one else could see. Her skin had that translucent quality of severe dehydration. Her lips were cracked, bleeding at the corners. Her clothes were layered, 3 or 4 shirts that did nothing against the cold, a jacket with the lining torn out. He set the child down gently. "Stay here." The girl nodded, clutching her bear tighter, watching as Marcus knelt beside her mother. His knees hit the concrete, tuxedo pants soaking through immediately. He'd never get the stains out. The thought was absurd, meaningless, but his brain clung to it anyway. Her forehead was on fire. He didn't need a thermometer to know she was pushing 103, maybe 104. Pneumonia, had to be. The wet clothes, the exposure, the way her breathing rattled, shallow and fast. "Ma'am," he touched her shoulder carefully. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. A sound escaped her, something between a moan and a word. He leaned closer, ear near her lips. "Ori." Sorry, she was apologizing. To who? Her daughter? God? The world? Marcus shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket, the one custom-made in Milan, $4,000 of wool and silk, and draped it over her shoulders. It wouldn't be enough. Nothing would be enough except real help, antibiotics, IV fluids, a warm bed. The child tugged at his shirt sleeve and he looked down. She was holding up her toy, offering it to him. He gets scared, she explained with a heartbreaking seriousness. But maybe he can help you not be scared too. Something in Marcus's chest tore completely free, some last pretense of emotional control. He took the bear, held it with more care than he'd held anything in years, and tucked it gently beside the woman's face. Your mommy's going to be okay, he said to the child, and prayed it wasn't a lie. I promise. Sirens cut through the rain, growing louder. The ambulance appeared around the corner, lights painting the wet street in red and white strobes. Paramedics piled out, moving with practiced efficiency, hands already reaching for equipment. Marcus stood back, still holding the child as they worked. Blood pressure cuff, oxygen mask. Questions he couldn't answer. Do you know her name? Her age? Any medical conditions? Allergies? Is she on any medications? I don't know, he repeated. I don't know. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and quick hands, looked up at him. Are you family? The child's arms tightened around his neck. She was shaking, whole body trembling, like a leaf in wind. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest. Too fast, rabbit quick with fear. Marcus looked at the paramedic, at the woman on the gurney, at the child who'd called him an angel, at the rain that just kept falling. Yes, he said. Yes, I'm family. The lie came so easily it scared him. 11:47 p.m., Harbor View Medical Center. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. That particular cocktail of bleach and the fear that hospitals could never quite scrub away. Marcus sat in a plastic chair bolted to the floor, the child asleep in his lap, his tuxedo pants leaving puddles on the linoleum. His phone had stopped buzzing an hour ago. 12 missed calls from Dr. Patel, 7 from his mother, 3 from his head of security, probably wondering why the Bentley's GPS showed them at a hospital instead of home. Lawrence had taken Owen home, thank God. The boy would be asleep by now, exhausted from therapy, probably doing his nighttime routine without deviation. Brush teeth for exactly 2 minutes. Line up his toy cars by color and size. Check that his nightlight was plugged in. Check 3 more times. Kiss the photo of his mother that Marcus kept on Owen's dresser because the boy wouldn't sleep without it. The child in his arms stirred, and Marcus held still, not wanting to wake her. She'd cried herself to exhaustion after they took her mother away, sobbing into Marcus's shoulder until there was nothing left. Now she slept with the kind of heaviness that came after crisis, her small hand fisted in his shirt. A nurse approached, shoes squeaking on the floor. Mid-40s, Latina, with a name tag that read Rodriguez. She had the look of someone who'd seen everything and could still muster sympathy. Mr. Reed? She kept her voice low, professional. The patient is stable. Severe pneumonia, acute dehydration, and significant malnutrition. Her temperature was 104.2 when she came in. Another hour out there, and we'd be having a different conversation. Marcus felt the child's weight shift against him. Will she be okay? With treatment, yes. We've got her on broad-spectrum antibiotics, IV fluids, oxygen support. She's young and otherwise healthy. She'll pull through. Rodriguez paused, consulting her tablet. Her name is Elena Marsh, 28 years old. No emergency contact listed. No insurance either, I'm afraid. The name stirred something in Marcus's memory, some distant echo he couldn't quite place. Elena Marsh. Why did that sound familiar? She'll need to stay at least 3 days, Rodriguez continued. Maybe a week, depending on how she responds to treatment. The bills are going to be substantial without insurance. Probably $6,000–7,000 at minimum. Marcus didn't hesitate. Bill me directly, whatever it costs. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. She'd probably seen stranger things in this ER. There's something else, she said, voice dropping even lower. When we did the initial workup, we found evidence of chronic malnutrition. Not just recent. This has been going on for months, maybe longer. And she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. There are old scars, self-inflicted, I think, on her inner wrist, several years old, well-healed, but consistent with a suicide attempt. Marcus looked down at the sleeping child, How close had this woman come to leaving her daughter alone in the world? How many times had she stood on that edge, looking into the dark, with only this small weight keeping her tethered to life? I ran her name through our system, Rodriguez said. She was here about 15 months ago. Came to our employee health clinic for a pregnancy test. Listed her employment as Reed Logistics. She looked at Marcus with new understanding. Your company, right? The memory hit like a freight train. 15 months ago, the restructuring, they'd cut 300 temporary positions across 6 warehouses, consolidating operations to improve efficiency and reduce overhead. Marcus had signed off on the list, approved the severance packages, authorized the termination letters. 300 names on a spreadsheet, 300 lives reduced to cells in Excel. Had Elena Marsh been one of them? He tried to remember, pulling up mental images of those meetings, his CFO presenting the numbers, his VP of operations explaining the redundancies, the board nodding approval, Marcus signing his name at the bottom of the page, already thinking about the next quarter's projections. He'd never looked at the names, never asked who these people were, what they'd be doing after Reed Logistics didn't need them anymore. They were just numbers, lines on a balance sheet, necessary casualties of business growth. Mr. Reed, Rodriguez was watching him with something that might have been pity. Are you all right? Was he? Marcus didn't know anymore. He felt like he was standing outside himself, watching some other man in a ruined tuxedo hold a sleeping child, while the weight of his own choices pressed down like the rain that still hammered against the windows. Can I see her? His voice came out rough. Elena, can I see her? Rodriguez nodded slowly. She's sedated right now, but you can sit with her if you want. Room 214, second floor. Marcus stood carefully, adjusting his grip on the child so she wouldn't wake. She was so light, this little girl who'd run into traffic to find help, who'd called him an angel when he was anything but. Her face was peaceful now, tear tracks dried on her cheeks, one hand still clutching the worn fabric of her stuffed bear. The elevator to the second floor moved in slow motion, or maybe time was just broken tonight, minutes stretching into hours. The doors opened onto a dimly lit hallway, hushed voices and beeping monitors creating an antiseptic symphony. Room 214 was at the end. The door stood ajar, soft light spilling into the hall. Marcus pushed it open slowly, not sure what he expected to find. Elena Marsh lay in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small under the white sheets. They'd cleaned her up, removed the layers of wet clothes, replaced them with a hospital gown. Her blonde hair spread across the pillow, no longer dark with rain. An IV line ran into her left arm. Oxygen tubes rested under her nose. A monitor beeped steady rhythm beside her, green lines tracking heartbeat and blood pressure, and the basic functions that meant alive. She looked younger than 28, fragile in a way that had nothing to do with physical size, and everything to do with how close she'd come to not existing anymore. Her face held traces of who she'd been before life ground her down, high cheekbones, full lips, the kind of features that would have been beautiful if she'd had the luxury of regular meals and safe sleep. Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed, the child still sleeping against his chest. He didn't know what he was doing here, didn't know what he could possibly say when she woke up. Sorry I fired you when you were pregnant and needed insurance. Sorry I never bothered to learn your name until I found you dying in the rain. The apologies felt worthless, empty words that couldn't undo the choices that had led to this moment. He'd built an empire on efficiency and growth, on quarterly earnings and shareholder value. He'd told himself it was business, nothing personal, just the way things worked in a competitive market. But efficiency had a human cost. Growth meant someone else's contraction. Shareholder value came from somewhere, and that somewhere was the difference between Elena Marsh having a home or dying on a bus bench. How many others were there? How many people had he cut loose without a second thought? People with children and rent and medical bills. How many Elena Marshes had he created with the stroke of a pen? The child stirred, lifting her head from Marcus's shoulder. Her eyes opened slowly, confused by the unfamiliar room, the antiseptic smell, the woman in the bed. Then memory returned, and her face crumpled. Mommy? Her voice was so small, barely a whisper. Is Mommy okay? She's sleeping, Marcus said gently. The doctors gave her medicine to help her feel better. But she's not going to disappear? The question hit Marcus like a punch to the solar plexus. What kind of life had this child lived that her first fear was disappearance? How many times had she watched her mother slip away into fever dreams or despair or places a 3-year-old couldn't follow? No, sweetheart, she's not going to disappear. I promise. The child studied his face with ancient eyes, weighing whether to trust this stranger in the wet tuxedo. Whatever she saw must have been enough, because she nodded and settled back against him, her gaze fixed on her mother. They sat like that for a long time, watching Elena breathe, listening to the monitor's steady beep. Marcus's mind churned through possibilities and consequences. He could pay the hospital bill, would pay it, but that was the easy part. Money always was. The hard part came after. Where would Elena go when they discharged her? Back to the streets? Back to that bus shelter to wait for the next pneumonia, the next close call? And the child? What was her name? He realized he'd never asked. This little girl who'd saved her mother's life by running into traffic, who'd offered him her bear to make him less afraid, and he didn't even know what to call her. Sweetheart? He pitched his voice soft, gentle. What's your name? She looked up at him, considering whether to answer. Sophie, she finally said. Sophie Marsh. I'm 3.5. It's nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm Marcus. Marcus. She tested the name, turning it over in her mouth. Are you really an angel? You don't have wings. No, he said honestly. I'm not an angel. I'm just a man who should have stopped sooner. Sophie thought about this with the gravity that children bring to profound questions. Mommy says it's never too late to do the right thing, even if you did wrong things before. The wisdom of it, coming from someone so young, made Marcus's throat tight. He wondered what kind of conversations Elena had with her daughter, what lessons she'd managed to teach despite having nothing, losing everything. Your mommy sounds very smart. She is, Sophie's voice filled with fierce pride. She knows all the numbers and can fix stuff when it breaks. She's the best mommy in the whole world. The words carried weight beyond their simplicity. This child loved her mother with complete certainty, the kind of love that didn't depend on circumstances or possessions or stability. She loved Elena Marsh for who she was, not what she could provide. Marcus thought of Owen, lone in his room with his carefully organized cars and his photograph of Sarah. Did his son feel that same certainty about him? Or had Marcus become just another source of routine, necessary but not necessarily loved? The thought sat heavy in his chest as he watched Elena sleep. The monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Sophie's breathing slowed, sleep reclaiming her. And Marcus Reed, CEO of a logistics empire, holder of more wealth than most people saw in 10 lifetimes, sat in a hospital room and felt more lost than he'd ever been. His phone buzzed in his pocket, barely audible. He pulled it out carefully, not wanting to disturb Sophie. A text from Dr. Patel. Marcus, we need to talk about tonight. Owen had a very difficult time when you didn't arrive. This inconsistency is harmful to his progress. Please call me in the morning. Guilt twisted in Marcus's gut. Owen, his son, who needed him, who'd been waiting at therapy for a father who never came. He'd called Lawrence to pick the boy up, but that wasn't the same. Owen needed routine, needed predictability, and Marcus had shattered that tonight for a woman and child he didn't know. Except he did know them. Not personally, not their stories or struggles, but he knew them in the abstract. They were the cost of doing business, the acceptable losses, the necessary cuts. They were the 300 names on a spreadsheet that he'd never bothered to make human. Until now. Elena's eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, REM sleep kicking in as her body fought infection and exhaustion. What was she dreaming about? Her daughter? The life she'd lost? Or maybe something simpler? Warmth, dryness, the absence of fear. The rain against the window had lessened to a gentle patter. Marcus checked the time, 2:17 a.m. In a few hours, the sun would rise on another day. Owen would wake up, do his morning routine, probably be angry or confused that Marcus hadn't been there last night. The Singapore deal would still need signatures. His mother would still be demanding answers for her ignored calls. Life would go on, the machine of Marcus Reed's existence grinding forward with all its carefully maintained momentum. But something had shifted tonight. Some fundamental calculation recalibrated. He couldn't unsee Elena Marsh's gray lips, couldn't unhear Sophie's small voice asking if he was an angel. He couldn't unknow that his signature on a termination letter had set this chain of events in motion, that somewhere in his drive for efficiency and growth, he'd forgotten that numbers had names. Names had faces. Faces had children who called them mommy and believed they were the best in the whole world. The door opened softly and Rodriguez appeared with another nurse. "Mr. Reed, we need to check her vitals. You might want to step out for a moment." Marcus stood carefully, Sophie's weight familiar now in his arms. He looked back at Elena one more time before leaving. In the harsh fluorescent light, he could see more clearly the toll of months or years on the street, the hollow beneath her cheekbones, the way her collarbones jutted sharp against skin, the scars on her wrist that Rodriguez had mentioned, faint lines barely visible unless you knew to look. She tried to leave, tried to escape whatever pain had become unbearable, but something had pulled her back, kept her tethered to this world. He'd bet everything he owned in that the something was the child in his arms, this little girl who'd offered her bear to comfort a stranger. In the hallway, Marcus found a bench and sat, letting Sophie settle more comfortably. She murmured something in her sleep, a word that sounded like home, and he wondered when she'd last had one, when either of them had. His phone buzzed again. His mother this time, not giving up. He stared at the screen, at Catherine Reed's name glowing insistent, and for once in his life, he ignored it. Whatever she wanted could wait. The world could wait. He had promises to keep, even if he didn't yet know how to keep them. 7:43 a.m., still room 214. Marcus woke to movement, muscles cramping from hours in a chair meant for short visits, not sleeping. Sophie was awake in his lap, sitting very still, her eyes locked on the hospital bed. Elena's eyes were open. She stared at the ceiling, not moving except for shallow breaths that made the sheets rise and fall. The oxygen tubes were still in place, the IV still dripping clear fluid into her arm. Her face held the blank expression of someone surfacing from deep unconsciousness, trying to piece together where they were and why. Then her head turned, slowly taking in the room. The monitors, the white walls, the window showing gray Seattle morning. Her gaze found Sophie, and something in her face cracked. Relief and anguish mixing into an expression that hurt to witness. "Baby," she whispered, voice raw from the oxygen tube. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry." Sophie scrambled off Marcus's lap and ran to the bedside, small hands reaching for her mother. Elena lifted one arm, the one without the IV, and pulled her daughter close, pressing her face into Sophie's hair with an intensity that spoke of how close they'd come to never having this moment. "You scared me, Mommy." Sophie's voice trembled. "You wouldn't wake up." "I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Marcus stood slowly, joints protesting, and for the first time Elena seemed to register his presence. Her eyes widened, tracking from his rumpled tuxedo to his face and back again. Recognition flickered there, though he couldn't tell if she knew him personally or just knew what he represented. Money, power, the kind of man who didn't belong in her world. "Who?" She stopped, coughed, winced at the pain it caused, started again. "Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Reed. How to explain this? I found you last night. You were at a bus stop, and Sophie came to my car for help." Elena's arms tightened around her daughter. The movement was protective, instinctive, the reaction of someone who'd learned not to trust help when it came. "You brought us here?" Each word seemed to cost her. "To the hospital?" "Yes." "I can't," another cough. "I can't pay for this. I don't have insurance. I don't have anything." "You don't need to pay." Marcus kept his voice level, non-threatening. "I've taken care of it." Her expression shifted from confusion to suspicion to something harder. "Well, it was a fair question. Why did strangers help? What did they want in return?" In Elena's world, Marcus imagined there were always strings attached, always a price that came due later. "Because you needed help," he said simply, "and because I could." She studied him with eyes that had seen too much, weighing his words against every broken promise and false kindness she'd probably endured. Sophie pressed closer to her mother, sensing the tension. The angel man helped us, Mommy. He gave you his fancy coat, and he let me hold his hand in the ambulance, and he stayed all night even though his clothes got all wet. Elena's gaze sharpened, taking in Marcus's ruined tuxedo for the first time, really seeing the water stains and wrinkles, the bow tie hanging undone around his collar. $8,000 of formal wear destroyed. Most people he knew would have sent the car around, called 911 from a distance, made sure help arrived without getting personally involved. Thank you, Elena said finally, though the words came grudging, forced past pride and self-preservation. For helping Sophie, for getting me here. You're welcome. Marcus paused, knowing this next part would be difficult. The doctor said you need to stay for a few days to make sure the infection clears completely. I can't stay. Elena tried to sit up, made it about 3 inches before her body betrayed her, strength giving out. She fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. We need to. I have to. You have to rest, Marcus said firmly. That's all you have to do right now. You don't understand. Her voice rose, desperation bleeding through. I can't afford to be here. Every hour in this bed is money I don't have. Bills I can't pay. She stopped, looking at Sophie, adjusting her words. We need to leave. Where would you go? The question hung between them, simple and devastating. Elena's face closed off, walls slamming down. She turned away, focusing on Sophie, smoothing her daughter's tangled hair with shaking fingers. That's not your concern. Maybe it should be. Elena's head snapped back toward him, eyes blazing with something between anger and fear. I don't need saving, Mr. Reed. I don't need some rich man in a fancy tuxedo deciding what's best for me and my daughter. I've been taking care of us just fine. You were dying. Marcus kept his voice gentle, but let the truth land hard. Another hour in that rain, maybe less, and Sophie would have been alone. Is that taking care of her? The words were cruel, necessary. Elena flinched like he'd struck her, eyes welling with tears she refused to let fall. Sophie looked between them, small face confused and scared, sensing the adult tension she couldn't understand. You think I don't know that? Elena's voice dropped to barely a whisper. You think I don't lie awake every night terrified of exactly that? Of leaving her alone? Of failing her? Of not being enough? She pressed her face into Sophie's hair again, shoulders shaking. I'm trying. I'm trying so hard, and it's still not enough. The raw pain in her voice struck something deep in Marcus's chest, in the place where his own failures lived. How many nights had he lain awake wondering if he was enough for Owen? If being a single father was destroying his son slowly, if the boy would be better off with someone who understood him, who wasn't broken by grief and guilt? I know you're trying, he said quietly. I can see that, but trying doesn't mean you have to do it alone. I am alone. Elena lifted her head, met his eyes with devastating directness. That's the reality. There's no one else. It's just me and Sophie, and whatever I can manage to hold together. Marcus thought about the termination letter, about the spreadsheet with 300 names, about the signatures he'd given without looking at the faces behind the numbers. He opened his mouth to confess, to tell her that he was part of why she'd ended up in that bus shelter, but the words caught in his throat. What would it accomplish? She was already suspicious, already barely tolerating his help. If she knew he'd fired her, that his efficiency metrics had eliminated her job when she was pregnant and needed it most, she'd refuse everything, would try to walk out of this hospital with pneumonia still burning in her lungs, would take Sophie back to the streets rather than accept help from the man who'd helped put them there. So he swallowed the confession, let it sit heavy and unspoken in his chest. Let me help, he said instead, just for a few days. Let me make sure you're well enough to, he almost said, take care of Sophie, but caught himself. To decide what comes next. Elena watched him with those two knowing eyes, like she could see the words he wasn't saying, the guilt he was carrying. Why do you care? She asked again. You don't know us. We're nothing to you. Because Sophie called me an angel. The truth came out before he could stop it. And I'm not. I'm very much not. But maybe I could be someone who helps anyway. Silence stretched between them, measured in heartbeats and the soft beep of the monitor. Sophie yawned, exhaustion catching up with her, despite the morning light. Elena held her daughter close, and Marcus could see the war happening behind her eyes, pride and pragmatism fighting for dominance. Just a few days, she said finally, so quiet he almost missed it, until I'm well enough to leave. Just a few days, Marcus agreed, though they both knew it was a lie. Nothing was ever that simple. The discharge papers took 40 minutes to process. Time Marcus spent watching Sophie draw pictures on the back of hospital forms, while Elena dozed in fitful intervals, her body still fighting infection, despite 3 days of antibiotics. The fever had broken that morning, finally leaving her skin clammy and pale but no longer burning to the touch. Dr. Martinez, a sharp-eyed internist who looked too young to have earned her white coat, cornered Marcus in the hallway outside Elena's room. She needs rest, real rest, not sleeping on park benches or in shelters. Her lungs are clear enough to discharge, but pneumonia has a way of coming back if the patient doesn't have proper recovery conditions. Marcus understood what she wasn't saying, the careful dance doctors did around the reality that medicine only worked if you had somewhere safe to heal. She'll have proper conditions. De Martinez's eyebrow lifted slightly. You're taking them home with you? Yes. That's generous of you, Mr. Reed. Her tone suggested she'd seen generous men before and knew how their generosity often came with price tags. Make sure she takes the full course of antibiotics. 2 weeks, no stopping early even if she feels better. And she needs to eat regularly. Her malnutrition levels are concerning. I'll make sure of it. Will you? Martinez held his gaze, unflinching. Because I've been working in this hospital for 6 years, and I've seen a lot of women like Elena Marsh come through those doors. Women who fall through every crack in the system until they end up in our ER at death's door. They leave here with prescriptions they can't afford and instructions for rest they can't follow because they're too busy trying to survive. Then they come back sicker, if they come back at all. So forgive me for asking, Mr. Reed, but what makes you different from all the other people who failed her? The question landed like a physical blow. Marcus thought about the spreadsheet, the termination letters, the casual efficiency of eliminating 300 positions. He thought about all the Elena Marshes he'd created without ever knowing their names. I don't know if I am different. The honesty surprised him. But I'm going to try. De Martinez studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good, because that little girl in there has already lost too much. Don't add yourself to the list of people who let her down. Lawrence brought the Bentley around to the hospital's main entrance at noon, the Seattle sky heavy with clouds that threatened more rain. Marcus emerged first, carrying Sophie, who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder during the wait. Elena followed slowly, one hand braced against the wall, the other clutching a plastic bag containing her few possessions. Sophie's bare, a water bottle, 3 worn dollar bills. She stopped when she saw the car, something in her expression shuddering closed. That's your car? Yes. I can't. She swayed slightly, caught herself. We'll take the bus. You've done enough. The nearest bus stop is 4 blocks away. You can barely stand. I'll manage. Sophie stirred, lifting her head from Marcus's shoulder. Mommy, my legs hurt. Can't we ride in the fancy car? Just this once? Elena looked at her daughter, and Marcus watched the war play out across her face again. Pride versus pragmatism, self-sufficiency versus survival. Sophie's legs hurt because they had spent months walking everywhere, sleeping on concrete, standing in lines at shelters and soup kitchens. 3 years old and already worn down by circumstances she didn't understand. Just this once, Elena whispered, and let Marcus guide her toward the Bentley. Lawrence held the door open, his face carefully neutral as he'd been trained to be, though Marcus caught the flicker of surprise when Elena climbed in with visible difficulty. The leather seats probably cost more than she'd made in a year at Reed Logistics. The car itself cost more than most people's houses. The drive to Mercer Island took 20 minutes through midday traffic, crossing Lake Washington on the I-90 floating bridge. Sophie pressed her face to the window, watching the water slide past below. Elena sat rigid beside her daughter, hands folded tight in her lap, looking at everything and nothing. Where are we going? Her voice was carefully flat, giving nothing away. My home. You'll have your own room, your own space, whatever you need to recover. For how long? as long as it takes. Elena turned to look at him directly for the first time since they'd left the hospital. Nobody does something like this without wanting something in return. So what is it you want, Mr. Reed? The question was fair, expected even. Marcus had spent 3 days thinking about how to answer it, how to explain motivations he didn't fully understand himself. In the end, he settled for the truth. I want to sleep at night without seeing your face. I want to look at my son and not wonder how many other children I've hurt without knowing their names. He stopped, the words catching. I want to believe I'm not the man I've been for the past 4 years. Elena's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in her eyes, a fractional recognition of shared pain. That's a heavy burden to put on a stranger. I know. I'm sorry. You can refuse. I can take you anywhere else you want to go, but I'm asking you to stay, at least until you're well. No strings, no expectations, just a safe place to heal. There are always strings. Elena looked out the window as the Bentley turned onto a tree-lined street, houses getting progressively larger, more expensive. Even when people don't mean for there to be. Especially then. They pulled through iron gates that opened automatically, up a curved driveway flanked by Japanese maples turning red with autumn. The Reed estate sat at the end, 12,000 square feet of modern architecture in glass and stone, angles sharp against the gray sky. A fountain marked the circular drive, water cascading over black granite in perpetual motion. Sophie's eyes went wide. Is this a castle? It's a house. But Marcus heard how it sounded, the inadequacy of the word for something this excessive. He'd bought the place 6 years ago, back when he and Sarah were planning their future, dreaming of filling the rooms with children and laughter. Now it echoed empty most days, just him and Owen and Mrs. Brennan moving through spaces too large for what remained of their family. Lawrence opened the doors and Marcus helped Elena out carefully. She moved like someone much older, each step deliberate, pain etched around her eyes. Sophie clutched her stuffed bear and stayed close to her mother's side. Suddenly shy in the face of all this wealth, the front door opened before they reached it. Mrs. Brennan stood in the entrance, her expression the practiced neutrality of someone who'd served the wealthy long enough to hide judgment. She was 60-something, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing the uniform she preferred, black slacks and a crisp white shirt that said professional without being servile. Mr. Reed, welcome home. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. This is Elena Marsh and her daughter Sophie. They'll be staying with us for a while. Can you prepare the guest suite in the West Wing? Something flickered across Mrs. Brennan's face, too quick to read. Of course, sir. I'll have it ready within the hour. And please let Owen know I'm home. I need to talk with him. Mrs. Brennan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Master Owen has been quite distressed by your absence, sir. Dr. Patel called twice this morning. Guilt twisted in Marcus's stomach. 3 days. He'd been gone 3 days, the longest he'd ever left Owen with just the staff. The boy would be spiraling, routine shattered, anxiety running unchecked through his small body. Marcus had called every night, but phone calls weren't the same as presence, weren't the same as the stability Owen needed like oxygen. I'll go to him now, Marcus turned to Elena. Mrs. Brennan will show you to your room. If you need anything at all, just ask. Elena nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Sophie leaned against her mother's leg, thumb in her mouth, looking around the massive foyer with wide, uncertain eyes. Marcus climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, his feet heavy on marble steps that cost more per square foot than Elena probably made in a month. The contrast sat bitter in his mouth. This house, this life, built on the backs of people like her, people he'd never bothered to see as human until their suffering literally collapsed at his feet. Owen's room was at the end of the north hallway, door closed, the do not disturb sign he'd made in occupational therapy hanging from the handle. Marcus knocked softly 3 times, paused, twice more, the pattern Owen needed to feel safe. Owen, it's Dad. Can I come in? Silence. Then small footsteps, the sound of the lock clicking open. The door opened a crack, and Owen peered out, his blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, red-rimmed and wary. You left. His voice was flat, affect dulled the way it got when he was overwhelmed. You were supposed to pick me up from Dr. Patel, but you didn't come. Lawrence came instead. You broke the pattern. I know, buddy. I'm so sorry. There was an emergency. You always say that. Owen's hands flapped briefly at his sides, a stim Marcus recognized as escalating anxiety. You say work is an emergency, meetings are emergencies. Everything is an emergency except me. The words cut deeper than any boardroom criticism Marcus had ever received. He knelt down, putting himself at Owen's eye level, even though his son was looking at the floor, at Marcus's shoes, anywhere but his face. You're right. I prioritize the wrong things too often. But this time it really was different. Someone needed help, and I couldn't walk away. Why not? Owen's voice rose slightly, stress bleeding through. Other people walk away all the time. You always say business is business. You always say you can't save everyone. So why did you have to save someone now? Why did it have to be the night you were supposed to pick me up? Because I've walked away too many times already. Because I'm trying to be someone my son can be proud of. Because I looked at a dying woman and saw every person I've failed, including you. Marcus couldn't say any of that, couldn't burden a 6-year-old with the weight of his father's guilt. Instead, he reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and touched Owen's shoulder. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. A little girl needed help saving her mom. She reminded me of you, actually. Brave and smart and doing everything she could to protect the person she loved most. I couldn't walk away from her, buddy. Just like I could never walk away from you. Owen processed this, hands still flapping. Is she still here? The little girl? Yes, she and her mom are going to stay with us for a little while, just until her mom gets better. In my house? In the guest wing. You probably won't even see them much. Owen's flapping intensified. But they'll be here, in my space, changing things, making it different. Nothing important will change, I promise. Your routine stays the same. Your room stays the same. Everything that matters to you stays exactly the way it is. You don't know that. Owen's voice cracked. Mom said things would stay the same, and then she died. You say things will stay the same, but they never do. Everything always changes, and I hate it. I hate change. Marcus felt something break open in his chest, the careful compartmentalization he used to function crumbling under the weight of his son's pain. Owen was right. Things changed. People died. Promises meant nothing against the chaos of existence. Sarah had promised to come home from the hospital with their baby, and instead Marcus had buried his wife and brought home a son who'd never known his mother's touch. You're right, he said quietly. Things change even when we don't want them to, but some changes are okay, buddy. Some changes make things better instead of worse. Can you trust me enough to see if this is one of the good changes? Owen finally looked at him, blue eyes swimming with tears he didn't know how to shed. What if I can't? What if they make everything wrong and I can't fix it? Then we'll figure it out together. You and me the way we always do. Owen thought about this for a long moment, hands gradually stilling. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Marcus's neck in the tight, full-body hug that meant I'm scared, but I'm trying to be brave. Marcus held his son, breathing in the smell of the lavender soap Mrs. Brennan used on Owen's sheets, feeling the small body trembling slightly with emotion he couldn't name. This was what mattered, not the Singapore deal or the quarterly reports or the expansion into new markets. Just this, a father and son holding each other in the face of a world that kept taking more than it gave. I love you, Owen, more than anything in the whole world. Owen didn't respond verbally, but his arms tightened a fraction, and Marcus felt the warm dampness of tears against his neck. They stayed like that until Owen's breathing evened out, until the trembling stopped, until the boy pulled back with the particular exhaustion that came after emotional storms. Can I have screen time now? I missed my tablet time yesterday because Lawrence didn't know the schedule. 30 minutes, then lunch. Mrs. Brennan made your favorite, grilled cheese with the crusts cut off. Owen nodded and retreated into his room, the door closing with decisive firmness. Marcus stood slowly, knees protesting, and let out a long breath. His phone buzzed. Dr. Patel, again, probably wanting to discuss Owen's missed therapy and Marcus's unreliability as a parent. He silenced it and headed back downstairs. Elena's voice drifted from the kitchen, quiet but tense. Marcus followed the sound and found her standing near the center island, Sophie beside her, both of them staring at Mrs. Brennan with barely concealed discomfort. Simply explaining the house rules, Mrs. Brennan was saying, her tone polite but with edges underneath. Mr. Reed prefers quiet during working hours. The study is off limits. Master Owen requires routine and doesn't do well with disruptions. Meals are served at specific times, breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. If you need something outside those hours, please check with me first. Elena's jaw was set tight. We're not planning to be here long enough for any of that to matter. Nevertheless, while you are here, it's important to respect the household structure. Mr. Reed is a very busy man with significant responsibilities. I'm sure you understand. The subtext was clear. Don't be a burden. Don't take advantage. Remember, you don't belong here. Marcus stepped into the kitchen, and Mrs. Brennan turned to him with a tight smile. Mr. Reed, I was just orienting your guests to the household routine. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Could you give us a moment? The housekeeper's expression flickered. Surprise, then something harder, before settling back into professional neutrality. Of course, sir. I'll finish preparing the guest suite. She left with measured steps, spine rigid with whatever thought she was keeping locked behind propriety. Marcus turned to Elena, who was looking everywhere except at him. I apologize for that. Mrs. Brennan means well, but she's very protective of Owen and the household stability. You don't need to apologize. She's right. Elena's voice was carefully neutral. We don't belong here. This was a mistake. If you could just take us to a shelter. Mommy, I'm tired. Sophie's small voice cut through the tension. My legs hurt, and I'm really tired. Elena looked down at her daughter, and Marcus watched the fight drain out of her, shoulders slumping. Sophie did look exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that no 3-year-old should have. The hospital stay had been hard on her too, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, eating vending machine food, watching her mother fade in and out of consciousness. Please stay. Marcus kept his voice gentle. At least for tonight. Let Sophie rest in a real bed. Let yourself rest. We can figure out everything else tomorrow. Elena closed her eyes briefly, swaying on her feet. When she opened them, the defeat in her expression hurt to see. Just tonight. Just tonight, Marcus echoed, knowing they were both lying again. Mrs. Brennan had indeed prepared the guest suite, a spacious 2-bedroom arrangement with its own sitting area and bathroom. The rooms were decorated in soft neutrals, expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of tasteful wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Sophie made a small sound of wonder when she saw the beds, both queen-size with cloud-soft duvets and more pillows than any 2 people needed. Can I jump on it? She looked up at her mother with such hope that Marcus's chest ached. Just a little bit. Elena managed a small smile. Then we need to rest. Sophie climbed onto the nearest bed and bounced twice, giggling, before collapsing into the pillows with a sigh of pure contentment. It's so soft, Mommy, like sleeping on a cloud. Elena sat on the edge of her own bed, hands gripping the mattress edge like she was afraid it might disappear. Her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. I'll let you settle in, Marcus said. If you need anything, there's a phone by the nightstand. Just press 0 for Mrs. Brennan or 1 for me directly. Thank you. The words came out thick. For all of this, I don't... She stopped, shook her head. Thank you. Marcus left them there, closing the door softly. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and let his own exhaustion crash over him. 3 days of hospital chairs and worry, 3 days of watching Elena fight pneumonia while Sophie tried to be brave, 3 days of wondering what the hell he was doing, bringing strangers into his home. Except they weren't strangers anymore. Sophie had slept on his shoulder and called him an angel. Elena had trusted him enough to accept help, even though everything in her eyes said she'd been burned by trust before. Owen had hugged him and cried and admitted he was scared of change. Marcus pulled out his phone and looked at the missed calls. 17 from his mother, 8 from Dr. Patel, 12 from his assistant about Singapore. The world kept spinning, kept demanding his attention, kept insisting that other things mattered more than this moment. He deleted every notification without reading them and headed to his study. The weeks that followed developed their own careful rhythm, a household learning to accommodate strangers in its midst. Elena recovered slowly, color returning to her cheeks, strength rebuilding in muscles that had been eating themselves for fuel. She spent the first few days mostly sleeping, waking only for meals that Mrs. Brennan delivered to the guest suite with cool efficiency. Sophie, resilient in the way only children can be, adapted faster. She explored the house in cautious increments, memorizing the layout, touching expensive things with reverent gentleness. Marcus would find her in different rooms: the library with its floor-to-ceiling books, the conservatory with its grand piano, the morning room with its view of the lake. She avoided Owen, sensing his need for space and routine. The two children orbited each other like shy planets, occasionally visible to each other but never quite intersecting. Until the afternoon, Marcus found them both in the library, separated by 20 feet in a careful understanding. Owen sat at his usual spot by the window, lining up his toy cars in precise rows sorted by color and size. Sophie was cross-legged on the floor near the opposite wall, the stuffed bear in her lap, watching Owen with fascination. Marcus started to intervene, worried Owen would be upset by the intrusion, but his son spoke first without looking up from his cars. "You can play over there if you are quiet. Red cars go first, then blue, then green, then yellow. That's the rule." Sophie nodded solemnly. "I'll be very quiet. I'm good at quiet." Something in the way she said it, "I'm good at quiet," made Marcus's heart clench. 3 years old and already trained to make herself invisible, to take up as little space as possible in a world that had no room for her. "You don't have to be quiet," he found himself saying. Both children looked up at him with identical, startled expressions. "You can play however you want. This is your home too, Sophie, at least for now." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Really?" "Really." Owen frowned, hands pausing over a red Mustang. "But I need quiet to concentrate." "Then maybe Sophie can be a little bit quiet, and you can be a little bit flexible. Think you can both do that?" Owen considered this with the seriousness he brought to all negotiations. "She can play quiet games, and she can't touch my cars unless I say it's okay." "I won't touch them," Sophie promised. "I'll just watch. Watching is my favorite game anyway." Owen returned to his cars, apparently satisfied. Sophie settled back against the wall, and Marcus realized she was drawing, not with crayons, which she didn't have, but with her finger on the hardwood floor, tracing invisible pictures only she could see. He left them there, two broken pieces from different puzzles, somehow finding a way to coexist in the same space. Elena was in the kitchen when he came down, helping Mrs. Brennan prep vegetables for dinner. The housekeeper's expression was carefully neutral, but tension radiated between them like heat. "You don't need to do that," Mrs. Brennan was saying. "You're a guest. I can't just sit around doing nothing." Elena's hands moved quickly, efficiently, chopping carrots with professional speed. "It makes me feel useless." "This is my kitchen, Miss Marsh. I have my own way of doing things. I'm just trying to help." "I don't need help." Marcus cleared his throat, and both women looked up. "Elena, could I talk to you for a moment?" She set down the knife immediately, wiping her hands on a towel. "Of course, I'm sorry if I overstepped." "You didn't." He shot Mrs. Brennan a look that said, "We'll talk later. I wanted to show you something." He led her through the house to the back, past the pool and the manicured gardens, to a building she probably hadn't noticed before, a converted carriage house at the edge of the property. It had been used for storage the past few years, a catch-all for things Marcus didn't know what to do with, but couldn't bring himself to discard. The interior was dusty, crowded with furniture covered in sheets, boxes stacked haphazardly, the accumulated debris of a life interrupted. But underneath the disorder, the bones were good. High ceilings, good light from large windows, solid wood floors. "What is this place?" Elena turned slowly, taking it in. "It used to be Sarah's art studio. After she died, I couldn't—" He stopped, started again. "I couldn't look at her paintings, so I boxed everything up and forgot about it. It's been sitting here for 4 years, full of ghosts. Why are you showing it to me?" Marcus took a breath, hoping this wasn't a terrible idea. "Because you need something to do besides chopping vegetables with Mrs. Brennan, and because I saw your hands the first night in the hospital. You have calluses in specific places, here and here." He gestured to where her thumb and forefinger met, the base of her palms. "Those are woodworkers' calluses, from hand tools, if I'm not mistaken." Elena's expression shuddered. How would you know that? My grandfather was a carpenter, taught me basics when I was young, before he died. I remember his hands looking like yours. She tucked her hands behind her back instinctively, hiding them. I did some construction work, when I could get it. Day labor mostly. It doesn't mean anything. It means you have skills, talents, things you're good at that have nothing to do with needing help or accepting charity. Marcus pulled the sheet off a workbench against the far wall, revealing tools underneath, saws and chisels and planes, all high quality, barely used. Sarah had bought them to work with reclaimed wood, part of some artistic vision she'd never lived to complete. You could use this space, fix it up, clean it out, make it into something useful. Not for me, for you, a place that's yours while you're here. Elena stared at the workbench, something complicated working across her face. I can't accept this. Why not? Because, she gestured helplessly around the dusty room, because this is too much. The bedroom is too much. The food is too much. Everything about this situation is too much. And I don't understand what you want from me. I don't want anything. Everyone wants something, and you're not wrong. Marcus leaned against the workbench, choosing honesty over comfort. But what I want isn't something you can give me. I want to not be the man who signs termination letters without reading them. I want to look at my son and believe I'm teaching him to be kind instead of efficient. I want to matter in a way that doesn't show up on balance sheets. Elena's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, termination letters? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Marcus had known this moment would come eventually, had rehearsed different versions of the confession. But faced with Elena's direct gaze, her body tensing with suspicion, the prepared words evaporated. You said you worked construction. Before that, what did you do? Why? Her voice had gone flat, defensive. Just to answer the question. I worked logistics, warehouse inventory management, for a big company on the east side. She paused. Reed Logistics. Your company, Mr. Reed? The silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding dawning. Elena took a step backward, her face draining of color. You're the one who fired me. The words came out barely above a whisper. 10 months ago. I was 3 months pregnant. My mother had just been diagnosed with cancer, and I got an email saying my contract was terminated effective immediately. No explanation, no severance because I was temporary. Just gone. Marcus's chest felt like it was caving in. Yes. You knew. Her voice rose. You knew this whole time. That's why you stopped. That's why you brought us here. It's guilt. This whole thing is just you trying to feel better about destroying my life. Elena, don't. She held up a hand backing toward the door. Don't try to make this into something noble. You took away my job when I needed it most. You took away my health insurance 2 weeks before my mother started chemo. You made me choose between being at her bedside when she died and keeping a roof over Sophie's head, and there was no good choice. Every night on those streets, every time Sophie cried because she was hungry or cold or scared, that was you. You did that. And now you bring us here to your mansion and show me this studio like it makes up for any of it? It doesn't make up for anything, I know that. Then what the hell are we doing here? Tears were streaming down her face now. What am I supposed to do with your guilt? How does that help me or Sophie? You can't undo what happened. You can't bring my mother back. You can't give me back those months of living in fear, never knowing if tomorrow would be the day I couldn't protect my daughter anymore. Marcus had no answer, no defense that wouldn't sound like justification. Elena was right about all of it. He'd destroyed her life with the stroke of a pen, never knowing, never caring to know. The fact that he felt guilty now didn't change the damage, didn't restore what she'd lost. You're right, he said quietly. This doesn't fix anything, but I'm still offering the studio, not because it makes us even, but because you deserve a space of your own. You deserve to be more than the person I hurt. And maybe if you stay long enough, you can figure out what comes next. Not for me, for yourself. Elena stared at him for a long moment, emotions warring across her face. Rage and pain and exhaustion, and something that might have been grief for who she'd been before everything fell apart. I hate you. The words came out raw but honest. I hate that you have the power to do this, to run in lives and then save them like it's all the same to you. I hate that my daughter likes you, that she feels safe here when she shouldn't. I hate that I'm so tired and broken that I'm actually considering accepting your pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? Marcus met her eyes, searching for the right word and finding only inadequacy. Responsibility. Reckoning. Maybe just the first decent thing I've done in 4 years. Elena looked away, jaw working. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its fury, replaced by something more hollow. I need time to think, to not make decisions while I'm standing in your dead wife's studio taking handouts from the man who ruined my life. Take all the time you need. She left without another word, the door closing with careful precision. Not quite a slam, but close. Marcus stood alone in the dusty studio, surrounded by ghosts and the tools Sarah had never lived to use, and wondered if there was any amount of good he could do that would balance the scales. The answer, he suspected, was no, but he had to try anyway. Elena didn't speak to Marcus for 3 days. She took meals in the guest suite, emerged only when she knew he'd be locked in his study with conference calls and reports. She walked the property's edges like a prisoner, measuring the walls of her cell, Sophie trailing behind with questions Elena couldn't answer. On the 4th day, Marcus woke to the sound of power tools coming from the carriage house. He found her there at 7 in the morning, still in the clothes she'd borrowed from Mrs. Brennan's daughter, covered in sawdust and sweat despite the October cold. She cleared half the space, boxes stacked efficiently against one wall, furniture she deemed salvageable arranged in another corner. The workbench was clean, tools organized by type and size. She was running a belt sander over what looked like an old table, sparks of wood dust catching the early light. She didn't acknowledge his presence, just kept working with focused intensity. Marcus watched for a moment, then picked up a broom and started sweeping the sawdust accumulating around her feet. Elena shut off the sander. What are you doing? Helping. I don't need help. I know, I'm doing it anyway. She stared at him, jaw tight, then turned the sander back on and returned to work. They spent 2 hours like that, working in parallel, not speaking. When the table was smooth and the floor clean, Elena finally set down her tools and faced him. I'm not staying because I forgive you. I'm staying because winter is coming and Sophie needs stability. That's all. That's enough. Don't mistake this for friendship or redemption. You don't get absolution just because you're paying the bills. I know. Elena wiped her hands on a rag, leaving smears of wood stain across her palms. I'm going to fix furniture, refinish pieces, repair what's broken, sell them if I can. Mrs. Brennan said there's a consignment shop in Bellevue that might take quality work. I'll pay you rent, $200 a month. It's all I can manage right now, but it's something. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice cut sharp. I have to pay my way. I have to contribute something. Otherwise, I'm just charity, and I can't live like that. I won't. Marcus understood. Pride was sometimes the only thing left when everything else got stripped away. $200 a month? For the studio space. Deal. Something in Elena's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Deal. The truce was fragile, held together by unspoken rules and careful distance. But it held. Owen noticed the change first. He had a way of reading emotional weather that neurotypical people missed, sensing shifts in household tension the way animals sensed storms. He found Marcus in the study one evening, standing at the window watching Elena carry lumber across the yard. Is Miss Elena still angry? Marcus turned from the window. What makes you think she was angry? Her face gets tight when you're in the room, like she's trying to make it not move. And she doesn't look at you unless she has to. People do that when they're angry but trying to be polite. 6 years old and already reading micro-expressions like code. She has reasons to be angry with me. I made some choices that hurt her before I knew who she was. Owen processed this, hands flicking through a pattern Marcus recognized as thinking deeply. Did you say sorry? Yes. And she didn't accept it? Sometimes sorry isn't enough, bud. Sometimes you break something that can't be fixed just by saying words. But you're trying to fix it anyway. Owen's tone suggested this was obvious, a fact requiring no debate. That's what you do when you break things. You try to fix them even if you're not sure how. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, pride and sorrow mixing. His son, who struggled to understand social nuance, had just articulated the core truth Marcus had been circling for weeks. You're right. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Is it working? I don't know yet. Owen nodded, apparently satisfied with the honesty. Sophie says her mom is good at fixing things. Maybe if you both work on fixing things together, it'll be faster. The logic was pure 6-year-old simplicity, the kind that cut through adult complications and found the heart of the matter. Marcus pulled his son close, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just started listening better. The observation landed like a dart. Owen was right about that too. Marcus had been too buried in his own grief and guilt to really hear what his son was saying, too focused on maintaining routines and managing symptoms to recognize the profound intelligence underneath the autism. I'm sorry I haven't been listening as well as I should. It's okay, you're learning. Owen pulled back, already moving toward his next thought. Can Sophie come play cars with me tomorrow? I thought of a new sorting system, and I want to show someone who'll understand. You'll have to ask her yourself, buddy. Owen's face scrunched with anxiety. What if she says no? Then she says no, and that's okay. But you won't know unless you ask. Owen considered this, then nodded with the determination of someone preparing for battle. I'll ask at breakfast. He did the next morning in front of everyone. The kitchen fell silent when Owen approached Sophie's chair, hands already flapping with nervous energy. Do you want to play cars with me? I have a new system. It's based on chassis weight distribution and aerodynamic coefficients, but I can explain it in simpler terms if you need. Sophie looked up from her cereal, spoon halfway to her mouth. What's aerodynamic? Aerodynamic. It means how air moves around the car to make it faster or slower. I can show you with diagrams. Okay. Sophie's face split into a genuine smile, the first one Marcus had seen that reached her eyes. I like diagrams, and I like cars, especially the red ones. Red ones go first in my system, Owen explained with utmost seriousness, because red is the fastest color. That's scientifically proven. Sophie nodded like this made perfect sense. Can I bring Mr. Bear? He likes cars too. Bears don't like cars. They're mammals, not machines. Mr. Bear is a special bear. He likes everything. Owen thought about this, logic warring with the desire for companionship. Okay, but he can only watch, no touching the cars. He'll just watch. He's very good at watching. They disappeared after breakfast, two small figures heading toward the library with a sense of purpose that made Elena's expression do something complicated. She caught Marcus's eye across the kitchen, and for a moment the wall between them thinned. Thank you, she mouthed. Marcus nodded, understanding layered beneath the simple acknowledgement. For the first time since the studio confrontation, the silence between them felt less like warfare and more like the quiet before something new might grow. The call from Catherine Reed came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks into Elena's residency. Marcus was reviewing quarterly projections when his mother's number lit up the screen, and he made the mistake of answering. Marcus, finally, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I've been busy, Mother. Too busy for family? Catherine's voice held the particular edge she used when disappointed, which was often. I'm in Seattle for a charity luncheon. I'll be at the house in an hour. We need to talk. She hung up before Marcus could protest. He stared at the phone, dread settling in his stomach like lead. His mother had opinions about everything, and they were rarely gentle. The last time she'd visited, she'd spent 3 days reorganizing Owen's therapy schedule and critiquing Marcus's parenting choices before departing in a cloud of expensive perfume and unsolicited advice. Mrs. Brennan took the news with grim efficiency. I'll prepare the formal sitting room and arrange for tea. Should I inform Miss Marsh and Sophie to stay in their quarters? No. Marcus surprised himself with the firmness. This is their home too. They're not hiding. Mrs. Brennan's eyebrow lifted almost imperceptibly. As you wish, sir. Catherine Reed arrived exactly 60 minutes later in a Mercedes S-Class, driven by someone she'd probably ordered to wait outside. She swept through the door in a Chanel suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, silver hair perfectly coiffed, diamonds glinting at her throat and wrists. Marcus, she allowed him to kiss her cheek, her perfume overwhelming in the entryway. You look tired. Are you sleeping properly? I've told you about the importance of rest for cognitive function. I'm fine, Mother. You're never fine. You just pretend to be. She moved past him, taking in the house with the critical eye of someone perpetually finding fault. Where's Owen? I brought him educational materials. That school of his is far too focused on socialization and not enough on academic rigor. Owen is playing. I'll get him in a minute. Marcus guided her toward the sitting room, hoping to contain the visit to one location. What brings you to Seattle? The Cancer Research Luncheon at the Four Seasons. I'm giving the keynote, but mostly I came because you've been avoiding me, and I want to know why. Catherine settled into a wingback chair with the posture of someone accustomed to commanding attention. 3 weeks of unreturned calls, Marcus. What's so important that you can't speak to your own mother? Before Marcus could answer, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Sophie appeared in the doorway, Mr. Bear dangling from one hand, her face uncertain. Mr. Marcus? Owen wants to know if you have more red cars because we ran out and the sorting isn't balanced. Catherine's gaze snapped to Sophie like a hawk spotting prey. Who is this child? Sophie shrank back, sensing danger. Marcus moved to intercept, placing himself between his mother and the little girl. This is Sophie. She and her mother are staying with us for a while. Staying with you? Catherine's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet. In what capacity? As guests. Guests, she stood, and Marcus was reminded that his mother, despite being 5'4", could make herself feel enormous through sheer force of will. You've taken in strangers? Without consulting me? Without considering how this affects Owen? Owen is fine. In fact, he's better than he's been in months. Sophie has been good for him. A 3-year-old child of unknown background has been good for your autistic son who requires careful management and consistent routine? Marcus, what were you thinking? I was thinking that helping people matters more than maintaining comfort. Catherine's expression hardened. Where is this child's mother? I assume there is a mother, unless you've taken leave of your senses entirely. Elena appeared behind Sophie, drawn by the raised voices. She'd cleaned up from the morning's work, but sawdust still clung to her hair, and her borrowed clothes hung loose from weight she hadn't regained. She looked young and tired and fiercely protective as she placed her hands on Sophie's shoulders. I'm Elena Marsh, Sophie's mother. Catherine's gaze traveled over Elena with clinical assessment, taking in every detail and finding them wanting. Miss Marsh, how long have you been living in my son's house? 3 weeks. And what is your relationship to Marcus? Elena's jaw set. He's helping us get back on our feet after some difficult circumstances. How charitable of him. The words dripped with skepticism. And what precisely are these difficult circumstances that required you to move in with a wealthy man you presumably just met? Mother, Marcus started, but Elena cut him off. We were homeless. I got pneumonia. Your son found us and brought us to the hospital, then offered us a place to stay while I recovered. That's the situation. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something in the air chilled several degrees. I see. And during this recovery period, what have you been doing besides accepting my son's generosity? I've been working, refinishing furniture in the carriage house, building something so I can support my daughter properly. How admirable. Catherine turned to Marcus. A word, in private. It wasn't a request. Marcus looked at Elena, trying to convey apology, but she'd already pulled Sophie from the room, her spine rigid with the dignity of someone who'd been dismissed by her betters too many times to show it hurt. Catherine waited until their footsteps faded before speaking. Have you completely lost your mind? I'm helping people who needed help. There's nothing insane about that. You've brought a homeless woman and her child into your home, around your vulnerable son, without background checks or references or any verification of who they really are. For all you know, she's running a con. These people are professionals, Marcus. They prey on guilt and wealth. Elena is not running a con. How do you know? Because she seems nice? Because her daughter is cute? Wake up, Marcus. This is exactly how good people get manipulated. Catherine paced, agitation evident in her sharp movements. And even if her intentions are pure, which I doubt, have you considered the message you're sending Owen? That strangers can waltz into his carefully structured life whenever his father feels charitable? That boy needs stability, not revolving door compassion projects. Owen likes Sophie. They play together. She's helping him learn social interaction without pressure. Owen doesn't need help from a homeless child. He needs professional therapy and consistent parenting, neither of which he's gotten since Sarah died. Catherine's voice cracked slightly on her daughter-in-law's name, the only sign of emotion she'd shown. You're doing this because you feel guilty about Sarah, about Owen, about whatever happened to put that woman on the streets. But guilt is not a parenting strategy, and it's certainly not grounds for bringing strangers into your home. The truth of it stung because Catherine wasn't entirely wrong. Marcus was operating from guilt, had been from the moment he'd learned Elena worked for Reed Logistics, but that didn't make the help less necessary or the choice less right. What would you have me do? Throw them out? Send them back to the streets? I would have you use sense. Put them in temporary housing, pay for a few months' rent at an apartment complex, get the mother job training and childcare assistance, help them through proper channels, not by playing house with them. Catherine moved closer, her voice dropping. Marcus, I know you're lonely. I know raising Owen alone has been impossibly hard, but this woman is not Sarah's replacement, and that child is not the sibling Owen lost. You can't build a family out of guilt and desperation. I'm not trying to replace anyone. Then what are you doing? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're setting everyone up for heartbreak. That woman will get attached to this life. Her daughter will get comfortable. Owen will form bonds. And then what? They leave and Owen's routine is shattered again? Or they stay and you're supporting them forever out of obligation? There's no good ending here, Marcus. Only different versions of pain. Marcus sank into a chair, the weight of his mother's logic pressing down. She was right about the complications, right about the risks. He'd brought Elena and Sophie into this house without thinking through the long-term consequences, without considering how extraction would work if it came to that. But he also remembered Elena's gray lips, Sophie's small voice asking if he was an angel, the way Owen had smiled when Sophie understood his car sorting system. Some things mattered more than risk management. I'm not sending them away. His voice came out quiet but firm. They stay as long as they need to. Catherine's expression closed off completely. Then I need to speak with my attorney. About what? About protecting Owen's interests, about ensuring my grandson isn't endangered by your impulsive decisions. She gathered her purse, movements sharp with anger. I love you, Marcus, but you're not thinking clearly, and someone needs to protect Owen from the consequences of your guilt. If you won't do it, I will. She left in a sweep of expensive fabric and implied threats, the Mercedes pulling away with a spray of gravel that made Mrs. Brennan wince. Marcus sat in the empty sitting room, his mother's words echoing, about protecting Owen's interests, about ensuring my grandson isn't endangered. If you won't do it, I will. He pulled out his phone and called the one person who might understand. Gepietsu answered on the third ring. Marcus, I was about to call you. We need to discuss Owen's progress. I know, but first I need to ask you something. Hypothetically, could my mother petition for custody of Owen? Silence on the other end, heavy with implications. What's happened? She doesn't approve of some choices I've made. She threatened to involve attorneys to protect Owen's interests. I need to know if that's just anger talking or a real threat. Dr. Patel exhaled slowly. Under Washington state law, grandparents can petition for custody if they can demonstrate the current custodial parent is unfit or that the child's welfare is at risk. It's a high bar, but not impossible. Why would your mother think Owen is at risk? Marcus explained the situation. Elena, Sophie, the past 3 weeks, Catherine's concerns about strangers and stability. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting, and when Marcus finished, the silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Marcus, I need to be honest with you. Your mother isn't entirely wrong. The words hit like a punch. What? You missed Owen's therapy 3 weeks ago without warning. Since then, his attendance has been sporadic. You've introduced major changes to his home environment, new people, new routines, new emotional variables, without preparing him or consulting his therapeutic team. From a clinical standpoint, these are red flags. But Owen is doing better. He's happier. He's engaging more socially. In the short term, possibly. But what happens when this arrangement ends? When Elena and Sophie leave and Owen has to process that loss on top of everything else he's experienced? You're setting him up for a significant attachment disruption, Marcus. That's not responsible parenting. Marcus felt the walls closing in, his mother on one side, his son's therapist on the other, both telling him he was making a mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was being reckless, letting guilt drive decisions that would hurt everyone in the end. So what should I do? Create boundaries, set timelines, make it clear to Owen that this is temporary, and most importantly, get back to his regular therapy schedule. Missing sessions sends the message that his treatment isn't a priority, and that's exactly the kind of pattern a custody evaluator would scrutinize. Dr. Patel's voice softened. I'm not saying you were wrong to help these people. I'm saying you need to be strategic about how you do it, especially where Owen is concerned. Your son comes first, Marcus. Always. I know he does. Then prove it. To your mother, to me, to the court if it comes to that. Show everyone that you can be compassionate without compromising Owen's well-being. Marcus ended the call and sat staring at his phone, Dr. Patel's words circling. Your son comes first. Always. It was true, non-negotiable. But did putting Owen first mean abandoning Elena and Sophie? Did it mean every act of kindness had to be weighed against potential psychological damage? He found Elena in the carriage house, working on a chair that had probably sat in someone's attic for decades. She was using a chisel to remove old veneer, careful, precise movements that spoke of skill and patience. She looked up when he entered, read something in his face, and set down her tools. Your mother doesn't approve. That's putting it mildly. She wants us gone. Marcus wanted to deny it, but the lie stuck in his throat. She's concerned about Owen, about stability and routine, and what happens when you eventually leave. When we leave, Elena's voice was flat. Not if, when. Elena, no, she's right. This was always temporary. We both knew that. I knew that. She turned back to the chair, hands gripping the chisel too tight. How long do we have? A week? 2? I'm not asking you to leave. But you're thinking about it, because your mother's right. We're a disruption, a complication, and you have a son who needs stability more than we need charity. It's not charity. Then what is it? Elena spun to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You keep saying that, but you won't tell me what this is. If it's not charity and it's not guilt, and it's not some attempt to fix what you broke, then what the hell are we doing here, Marcus? He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, but it was too complicated, too entangled in motivations he didn't fully understand himself. He'd brought them here to ease his conscience. Yes. But somewhere along the way it had become about more than that, about Sophie's laugh echoing through empty hallways, about Elena's fierce determination to rebuild her life, about the way Owen lit up when Sophie understood his explanations. It had become about what felt right, even when logic said it was wrong. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know what this is or where it's going or how it ends, but I know I'm not ready to end it yet. That's not good enough, Elena's voice cracked. Sophie is getting attached. She asks me every night if this is our real home now. I keep telling her it's temporary, but she's 3. She doesn't understand temporary. She just knows she has her own bed and enough food and a boy who plays with her like she matters. And when we leave, when you finally decide the complications outweigh the convenience, it's going to break her heart. So your not knowing isn't good enough, Marcus. Not for her. The truth of it sat heavy between them. Marcus had been so focused on his own guilt and Owen's needs that he hadn't fully considered what this was doing to Sophie, how security given and then taken away might hurt worse than never having it at all. I'm sorry, you're right. I should have thought this through better. Should have, Elena laughed bitterly. The story of my life. Everyone should have done better, thought harder, cared more. But they didn't, and here we are, and sorry doesn't change anything. She turned back to her work, dismissing him. Marcus stood there for a moment, wanting to say something that would fix this, make it better. But there was nothing to say. Elena was right. His mother was right. Dr. Patel was right. He was playing with lives, and someone was going to get hurt. The sound of breaking glass brought him running back to the house. He found Mrs. Brennan in the kitchen, sweeping up the remains of what looked like a serving platter. Her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, it slipped." "It's fine. Are you hurt?" "No, I just—" She set down the broom and pressed her palms flat against the counter. "Your mother called. She wants me to document everything. Every interaction with Miss Marsh and Sophie. Times, dates, anything that might be relevant to Owen's welfare." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. "She asked you to spy for her." "She asked me to protect Master Owen. Sir, I've been with this family for 15 years. I watched you and Miss Sarah build this life. I was there when Owen was born, when his mother died. I've dedicated myself to this household's well-being." Mrs. Brennan met his eyes, and her expression held something close to desperation. "But I don't know what the right thing is anymore. Miss Marsh works hard. She doesn't take advantage. Sophie is a sweet child who's been through things no child should experience. But your mother's concerns aren't baseless. Owen does need stability, and you have been different since they arrived. Distracted. Torn. So what are you going to do? Report back to my mother? I'm going to ask you what you want me to do tomorrow, because this is your house, your son, your decision. But you need to make it, sir. You need to decide what comes first and commit to it fully. Otherwise, everyone suffers. Owen, Miss Marsh, Sophie, even you." Marcus looked at the broken platter scattered across the floor, shards of porcelain that could cut if you weren't careful. Everything felt like that right now, sharp-edged, dangerous, requiring careful navigation, or someone would bleed. "Tell my mother nothing is happening that endangers Owen. Tell her Elena and Sophie are here with my full knowledge and consent, and that this is my home and my choice." He met Mrs. Brennan's gaze steadily. "And if she wants to challenge that, she can do it through proper legal channels, not by recruiting my staff to build a case against me." Mrs. Brennan nodded slowly. "As you wish, sir." She finished cleaning up the glass, and Marcus watched her work, wondering if loyalty could be divided or if eventually everyone had to choose sides. He was asking Mrs. Brennan to choose his side against his mother, asking Dr. Patel to trust his judgment despite the red flags, asking Owen to accept change when stability was the boy's lifeline. He was asking too much of everyone. But the alternative was sending Elena and Sophie back to nothing, back to bus stops and pneumonia and the slow grind of poverty. He couldn't do that, wouldn't do that, even if it cost him everything. Owen found him in the study that night after Sophie and Elena had retreated to their suite. The boy climbed into Marcus's lap without asking, something he rarely did anymore, and pressed his face against his father's chest. "Are Miss Elena and Sophie leaving?" Marcus's arms tightened around his son. "What makes you think that?" "I heard grandmother on the phone with Mrs. Brennan. She was using her angry voice, the one that sounds polite but isn't. She said you were making poor choices and I deserve better." "Buddy, I like Sophie." Owen's voice was muffled against Marcus's shirt. "She doesn't make me feel weird. She just listens to my explanations and asks good questions. And Miss Elena fixed my drawer that was sticking, and she didn't make me talk about feelings after. She just fixed it and left. I like that they're here. I like it too. Then why does grandmother want them gone?" How to explain adult complications to a 6-year-old mind that processed in concrete absolutes? Marcus searched for words that would be honest without being overwhelming. "Grandmother is worried that having them here might be hard for you. That if you get used to them being around and then they leave, it might hurt." Owen processed this, hands doing their familiar flapping pattern. "Like when Mom left?" The question drove straight through Marcus's chest. "Yes, like that. But Mom didn't want to leave. She got sick and died. That's different from choosing to leave." Owen pulled back to look at Marcus's face, his expression serious. "Miss Elena and Sophie aren't sick, right? They're not going to die?" "No, buddy, they're not sick." "Then if they leave, it's because someone makes them or because they want to. And if they want to leave, that's okay because people should do what they want. But if someone makes them leave when they don't want to, that's not okay. That's mean. The child logic was flawless, cutting through all the adult justifications and landing on simple truth. If Elena and Sophie were forced out because of Catherine's threats or Dr. Patel's concerns or Marcus's own fear of complications, that was choosing cruelty over kindness. You're right, Owen. That would be mean. So don't let grandmother do it. You're the parent. Parents are supposed to protect people, not make them leave when they're safe. Marcus held his son close, breathing in the scent of lavender soap and innocence, feeling the steady heartbeat of the one person in the world he'd die to protect. Owen was right. Parents were supposed to protect people. That didn't stop when convenience demanded otherwise. Okay, buddy, I won't let anyone make them leave. I promise. You're good at keeping promises. Owen settled back against Marcus's chest, apparently satisfied. Except when you're not, but you're trying to be better. The assessment was devastatingly accurate. Marcus laughed despite everything, despite the weight of his mother's threats and Dr. Patel's concerns and Elena's rightful anger. Owen had a way of reducing complex situations to their essentials. And right now, the essential was simple. Try to be better. Keep the promises that matter. I love you, Owen, more than anything. I know, you tell me all the time. It's one of your patterns. Owen yawned, sleep creeping in. Can we stay like this for a while? As long as you want. They sat like that until Owen fell asleep, father and son holding each other against a world that kept demanding impossible choices. And Marcus made a decision. His mother could threaten. Dr. Patel could warn. Elena could push him away out of self-preservation. But he was done letting fear make his choices. He was done choosing the safest path when the right path was clearly marked. Elena and Sophie were staying. Not as charity cases or guilt projects, but as people who mattered. As family, in the way family meant more than blood, commitment, choice, showing up day after day even when it was hard. He'd figure out the rest as he went, but they were staying.